'Tis a fine foggy night tonight, and I doubt if anyone has ever told you of the marvelous fogs we have in Aberdeen.
Oh, God!
Eugene.
Bakersfield.
Los Angeles.
San Francisco.
He wasn't giving me my props in Oaktown.
Portland.
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles de California.
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
You gotta find your Irvine.
Irvine?
Hanford.
Eugene!
Seattle.
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 Sacramento.
Fresno.
We're going to Vancouver!
Modesto, California.
San Diego.
Gina.
You know, there might be an opening for a manager in Visalia next spring.
Yakima, right?
Vallejo, California, the V.
Welcome to the West Coast Sojourn Podcast. I'm Donnell Alexander.
And I'm Lev Anderson.
Right on time. We are talking today with Sophia Sky from the Seattle Erotic Arts Festival. I guess it's the name of our organization is the Pan Eros Foundation, but we're going to be talking about the event itself, which happens weekend of May 4th in Seattle at the Exhibition Hall. And first I wanted to, because Lev is one of the handful of documentary filmmakers I know who've actually made a feature film that was released and all that, I wanted to bring up something that we touched on just a little bit when our guest was Lauren Oshiko, the cannabis journalist, and that is the Prince film, the documentary that's never coming out. What do you know about it again?
Well, I know it's a sprawling epic of a thing. I don't know if they were going to do multiple episodes, but it was like 9 hours of edited together stuff. I think it was a little bit like the O.J. Made in America documentary that he made, the epic multi-episode show. Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure it shows a side of Prince that isn't necessarily flattering or, enhancing his legacy enough. I guess that's what the estate decided in the end, right? And so they kind of put the kibosh on the whole thing after years of production. And I mean, my take is it's kind of on the filmmaker in a way, because so much of I feel like documentary filmmaking is about the relationship. You're not like paying these actors or whatever to say what you want them to say in the script. You're working with human beings that have relationships with the subject, and you have to have a relationship that you have clear communication, so you don't get blindsided by these things where you spend years working on a project and then just having it squashed. So I mean, I can see from the outside that it would look like these people are being unrealistic, but Prince was always very protective of his estate. He wouldn't let YouTube videos of him, circulate. Like, he would shut that down. So it doesn't surprise me his estate has the same concerns, and I'm just curious why they even entered into this relationship in the first place. If that was going to be the case, and why this guy, specifically having known his work, I would imagine. But it kind of seems like I would, like, if this were to happen, I would say, what did I do wrong in this relationship? Why didn't I see this coming? Why didn't I address these concerns from the outgo? That would be my opinion. The filmmaker is Ezra Edelman. He's actually, I don't know if you know this, the son of Marion Wright Edelman. Yeah, isn't that something? He made Made in America, he made this thing, and I think most people, when they hear the story of this film that everyone really wants to see, that probably isn't going to come out, tends to come out on the side of the artist. That's just what we do, I think, because we want to see the material and because we live with this idea of freedom of expression. But, the fact is, the permissions behind the scenes are the least sexy thing about filmmaking, and no one really wants to think about it. You agree? Yeah, but that's part of the job. I mean, there's plenty about filmmaking and stuff I didn't really like. Getting the releases, getting the, having to make agreements about footage that you're using or something. When it feels like a lot of it should be fair use or fair game, but it's just the reality, man. Well, I feel like we're going to miss something. There's no question about it. I think it's so tantalizing to think that you have the story told
by someone who's a master of the form. There are very handful. I don't know if you have a pantheon of documentary filmmakers, but Ezra Edelman made it. He won the Oscar for that thing, and the idea that he could fulfill all this mystery about an artist whose career is based largely on mystery is it's disappointing.
Yeah, well, it's certainly disappointing, and some of that stuff will come out at some point, probably, maybe, I don't know, but maybe that's just the way. Maybe that's just the way the purple is. It's just going to remain a mystery.
We mentioned it on the podcast with this guy Elon Del McMillan, the attorney who is keeping this from happening. He actually threatened to sue me about 10 years ago.
Oh, what did you do?
Source magazine. I stopped talking about him. That's for damn sure.
So I feel like you should have let us know. I feel like you should have let us know of this previous relationship you had with this lawyer before we started talking about the issue. Because maybe that's really what you want to talk about.
No. You saw I was going to let us get away without it, but I do think that it's telling. It's germane because he's not someone who cares about culture. He's someone who cares about the dollar. I'd written the story about Common for The Source like 2009, and I didn't get paid. And he was owning it at the time, or at least he bought it. I don't remember. He didn't deny it. I did this campaign online called The Big Payback, and most people who owed me money paid me. He was the only guy who shut that shit down. Over $2,500. He's a hardcore dude, and I don't think he cares about culture. Your biggest point that the Prince Estate is famously private it's the most obvious point, and no one's talking about it. Before we go to Sophia, I just want to know if you have any thoughts. There was this conversation briefly about Seattle as in the Pacific Northwest having this weird kind of horniness. Can you reassert your theory about why your place is such a horn dog mecca?
It wasn't my theory to begin with. I was commenting on what you were commenting on, I believe. I didn't bring up the horniness of the Northwest. That might just happen anytime you see me on screen, but I don't know. I just appreciate playing the heteronormative old white guy on the podcast, and I get to ask these stupid questions and throw out these half baked ideas. But I think I do agree that I think there's something with the weather and the terrain and the spirit of the people up here that might lend itself to horniness.
Yeah, there's that, and then the basic idea that you all were. It's the end of America. It's the end, and a lot of people sort of end up there. Sophia had the line about what's the word? Serial killers. I'm going to say this as nicely as I can, but edgy sexuality at its extremes can reach into the Bundy-esque territory. And I think that's one of the cool things about Sophia ending up in that article in The Guardian we discussed about consent and Diddy. She was quoted in the context of that about how the sex-positive community is so apart from that because she is an expert in consent. I think Sophia, and I appreciate her because she's taught me more about consent than I knew there was need to know. And, that line is something we see crossed more and more. Can I say one more thing before we go on? Because I did a bit of misinformation in the podcast about the actor Gabriel Olds, I think his name is. He's been showing up. The LA Times did a big expose about the series of. He's an actor. I forget what shows he's been on, but he's he's basically been sexually assaulting people in the realm of the rough sex community, and there gets to be these conversations that are. I think need to be augmented about choking and these things that people see in porn and videos, and they're getting normalized. But when I tried to make these points, I sort of underplayed what Gabriel Olds did. I thought it was just about choking, and it turns out he did a whole bunch of other shit. So I just want to make it clear that I am not defending this man. I just think that young people need to have a better conversation about choking.
Yes, please.
Are you ready? Are you ready to, as the heteronormative man, are you ready to lead this?
I'm a little nervous, but I'm ready. Yeah,
okay.
I'm ready.
I mean, I shouldn't even have said that. I should have said a heteronormative man of a certain age, because these kids, I mean, I have to tell my boys, I had to tell my boys when they were younger, that there's a huge distinction between what they're seeing in the world of pornography online and what real life is like.
Yeah.
Let's have Sophia
Skinamax.
talk about this. What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just said it compares no more to Skinamax or whatever we used to have.
Oh, God. That's so anodyne. Sophia Sky and the Seattle Erotic Arts Festival. Really interesting stuff. 3, 2, 1, and welcome to the West Coast Sojourn Podcast. I'm Donnell Alexander here with Lev Anderson. Who's our guest this week?
Hello, what's up? Our guest is Sophia Sky from up in Seattle. Sophia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you for having me on. My name is Sophia Sky. I'm the executive director of the Pan Eros Foundation, and our biggest program is the Seattle Erotic Art Festival, which is coming up on May 2nd.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the festival and what happens there?
Sure. What we do is we put out a call for art every year, and it's a worldwide call for art. And what we're doing is we're trying to get artists to answer the question, what is erotic? And we have approximately 250 pieces of visual art every year, not to mention that we also put together a literary anthology of poetry, flash fiction, and short stories that usually has anywhere from 30 to 50 authors. And we have performances that happen all weekend long at the event. And we have a festival store that is kind of like modeled on a museum store, so that we also get a lot of people who do more merchandising, smaller works of art, artisanal type crafts that have anything to do with sexuality. And our goal is to really kind of expand what people see as valid forms of sexuality relationships. And we want to basically people to have more understanding and love for each other. Because if you can look at a piece of art that is something that you're not into, but you can see the beauty of it and the artistry of it, it gives you a sense of, oh, I understand what those people are into. I'm not into it, but good for them. They're having a great time. So it's, we roughly have 400 plus artists every year that participate in the festival, and about 4,000 to 5,000 people that come to the festival every year over the course of the weekend. And it's an experience. It's not a convention. It's not just an art show. We have people that buy, basically a weekend pass and do things all weekend long with us, because not only can you look at the art and watch the performances, but there are also interactive art installations where you can be a part of creating something, or you can have an experience. We've recently just added films, and so now we have a wonderful film festival called the Pan Eros Film Festival that is very much trying to explore what it's like to experience sexuality from all different lenses, and we accept films worldwide. And then we also just started having the Erotic Movement Lab, which is all about giving people permission to, through movement and dance, to experience creativity and express themselves that way. So, it's like everything from like just, sensual yoga to using your body to like turn on your partner, or using your body to just express yourself. It's, we're trying to create this full experience where you can have all of your senses delighted at our event, except your genitals. We don't do that. You got to go home and do that. Yeah. we'll get you ready for that.
I can't speak because I've been to the festival after the festival, and those things tend to happen because you're never going to meet a more interested group of people in the erotic realm, and that's what I find really interesting. I find it amazingly curated. I met a partner there many years ago, but I wanted to ask you. You talk about like 4,000 or 5,000 people there and 400 pieces of art. When you first got involved, what did it look like? I know it couldn't have been that big a deal.
Oh no, when it first got involved, we were in a space that was called Town Hall here in Seattle, and it used to be the very old Town Hall, and now it's just an event space, and its capacity was 400 people, and I would say that it was maybe like 120 pieces of art. It was a lot for that very small space, and it was just an art show that had a live auction, and that was all that happened there. And then it was, and it's just grown from there. That was in 2003. So we're in our 23rd year now. We just keep getting bigger and bigger because more people want to be involved.
I find it an interesting kind of part of the art and commerce world, just because it's, I mean, to no fault of its own or anything, it feels like kind of like a private society or a private, consumer activity that, you really, like, I wonder, like, how quickly you discovered there was, like, a real market or audience for this stuff, after those initial experiences, because, I'm always surprised, like, the preponderance of sex toy stores, like, or sex experience stores, I don't know what they're called, but, that there's a lot of them and they're thriving, and you just don't think so much about, there's a lot of people doing this. I think it was kind of similar when the marijuana dispensaries opened, and you're like, damn, there's a lot of people smoking weed, and I had no idea. So like, how do you gauge the size of the audience? Like how, it's grown a lot, but I'm like, is it, and I'm sure it's getting gradually more public, but how do you work with that kind of an audience?
That's the interesting thing about this, is that when we very first started, we didn't expect to reach capacity. And for clarity, I was there at the first one, but I wasn't involved in the organization yet. That was actually my introduction to the organization. So I'm speaking about a history that I only saw just a sliver of as a participant. My partner and I at the time had art that was that got accepted into the show, and it was bonkers. There was a line of people all the way around the block who wanted to get in because they had no idea how many people were going to show up. And one of the things that I've quickly noticed as an event producer for the Seattle Erotic Art Festival, as well as other shows that I've done, is the more artists you have, the more people you're going to automatically have show up, because there's always going to be a core group of people that everybody has who comes to their baseball games. It's like they have, every artist has at least 5 friends that show up to support them. And so having a group show automatically gives you a little bit of an audience. And then we started out as being it was put on as kind of like a kink event in the kinky community up here in Seattle. And then it's slowly grown over time. And the fascinating thing is that we do get the people who come in and who are just like, ooh, did you hear about that really sexy thing that's happening? Let's go check it out. And it becomes like an adventure that people go to. And over the years, because we have taken the idea that erotic art is not just well-lit porn, we've expanded when I came in, I really started expanding the definition to say that erotic art is anything that talks about sexuality, orientation, gender, identity, your relationships, how you view the world through your eroticism, anything that makes you feel juicy.
Sophia, how did you come to that decision? I mean, that just is it something you arrived at on your own? Was this a lot of research? Was there a committee that you?
No, I'm a bossy person, and I just decided that this is what it was going to be. But it was really based on what I had heard other people talking about. I was involved in a community theater for a while here in Seattle called the Little Red Studio, and the idea of the Little Red Studio was to kind of harness that erotic energy, that juicy sexiness, and put it into creative endeavors. So while the performances and the art and the poetry that happened at those events was all rooted in sexuality, it didn't necessarily have to be sexy. Most of it was, but it was kind of like the idea is that you start out really base and body, and you slowly move up the chakras as you're throughout the night to where eventually you're not just doing sexy dance and watching sexy movement, you're also hearing sexy poetry, and then you're having more of like a spiritual type of experience at the end of the event. Kind of that idea of moving the energy up through all the chakras and really making good use of it. And from that same group, I also was exposed to the idea that you have Eros and Thanatos, is that you have the life-giving energy and you have the death energy, and you constantly have to destroy to create, and you have to create out of death. And so that idea that Eros or erotic energy is life force energy. And if you think of that as, okay, anything that's juicy and makes me feel vibrant and makes me want to go create art, and anything that makes me feel alive is erotic, then it really opens up the idea of what is sexy, what is erotic. It's not just what happens between our legs or, between our mouths. It's it really expands the possibilities for juiciness, and also think of the word scent. Mm-hmm.
How did that change the festival when you made that transition?
When we started having more art that made people look at it and go, "What are those people doing?" It made people have conversations about what is sex, what is intimacy, and when we have those conversations, it really gets people talking about it, and it makes it less stressful, makes it less hidden, it takes a lot of the shame out of sexuality. In the kinky community, there are people who are very into like leather, and to the point where like shining a pair of leather boots, doing leather care on a pair of leather boots is an act of sensuality for them. And and other people look at that and go, somebody's shining your boots, what's so cool about that? Whereas other people are like, oh, did you see what they did? They licked it to like get it wet again, to you can make anything sexy if you want to, if you really just are enthusiastic about it. So that's been an amazing thing, is watching people who come to the festival, and sometimes they're like, I've done that before. And I've heard people say that, oh yeah, I've gone before. And I've heard other people say, oh, the art festival's coming up. I wonder which piece of art I'll buy. I wonder what kind of art I'll find this year that I fall in love with.
Yeah, I mean, that makes more sense to me. And I think also, I going back, like I feel like there's, so I have a cousin that lives in Berkeley, and we're not especially close. It's like a third cousin or whatever, but he and his partner have a huge erotic art collection, and nice. And it's they're a gay couple, been together forever, but this huge collection. And when I stayed with them last, they were like, well, you can stay in the boys' room, and it was a room covered with erotic art. But it was interesting because I know they've got like sculptures and other things that are a little more contemporary, but this was like stuff from like, it seemed like from the 50s, 60s, 70s kind of stuff. A lot of sailors.
Oh, cool.
And different things, and it made me think about like, oh, that's the history of what turns them on, or like that's, that was the sexuality back then, was, these big muscular guys in uniforms. And so seeing that, I looked at it less as like erotic art and more as like kind of a historical document in a way too.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, and it's really amazing. Right, like the old muscle magazines from the 1950s were very much subtext, like this is how we get our homoerotic porn, but we can't actually show too much. Yeah, yay for Speedos. But it's kind of fascinating how over time how where we find our art and how we find things that give us pleasure to look at.
I know my wife is a curator, and she juries some shows once in a while, and it's a lot of work. You go through a lot of stuff, because if you're including 200 plus artists, then you're looking at probably like 1,000 artists, and right? I'm guessing. I'm not sure, but it's a lot of work.
Please talk a little more about that. I really want to hear about that part.
Okay, so we get on average, so this time we got about, for just visual artists, we got almost 500 artists submitting art to the festival, and we accepted about, I think it was like 160, no, it was in the 170 something that got accepted into the show.
Yeah, I mean,
how does that compare over
just
time?
Trying to think. Yeah, so we have 242 pieces and 172-ish artists that got accepted. So it's not quite 2 a person, which is really nice because we're trying to get as much variety. And over time, I would say in about 2020, I think 16, I kind of made the decision that we weren't going to ever have more than 250 pieces of art because for 2 different reasons. We're putting up the art show. We have 2.5 days to put it up, to hang it on all the walls before we open doors, because we're renting a space just for 1 week. And we found that anything over 250, it just took too long to hang all of the art. And also I was noticing that people were, whenever we went over 250, I would have people going, yeah, I'm maxed out. I got through most of it, and my brain is too full of art and I can't look at anything else. And the idea that I have some artists that aren't getting seen because they're deeper into the festival, or because, people like to go in a clockwise circle when they're, traversing a space. The idea that I'm relegating some artists to not having as many see their art just feels way worse than telling people, sorry, I can only have so many of you. And so Lev, that's a big part of it.
Lev, I'm curious, how does your wife, when she does these shows, is she putting numeric limits on the number of pieces that she has?
Well, I mean, there's space limits for what, usually these are for like other museums and other cities than where she works. So there's like space limits, just wall space, or like what they've accepted in the past. So she, it's just a lot of work, and I don't know how much like background checking you do, but she'll do research on each artist that submits stuff to see where they're coming from, and just to compare to their other work they didn't submit or whatnot. So it's a process, and I don't know that people appreciate how much work that is.
They don't know. They're like, you just pick some art, and it's like, no, it's not quite that easy. So we have a 2-step process for our curation. We have what we call we call it a blind jury, and that's where we invite 5 different people every year, and we do an artist, an art collector, an art professional, and a sexuality activist of some kind, and then someone who is from our planning committee. And what they do is they vote on art, and it's approximately about 60 to 65% of the art they pick. And then the rest of the art, we have a curation team. And so for the jury, they don't get to know anything about the artist. They don't know what gender they are. They don't know their name. They don't know where they're from. And we do that to just kind of grade the art just on its art itself. And then the curatorial team, they're the ones where we go through and say, okay, so here's what the jury got picked, what's missing? And we go through, and then we pay more attention to, do we have a good representation of gender? Do we have enough trans and non-binary artists that are getting their messages out? And filling in little niches like, this jury didn't like abstract art or anything that wasn't representative. So we go and we look for artists that are doing that kind of thing, and make sure that we have that represented. We've had juries before that, like printmaking, is one of my favorite forms of art, and so many people just don't understand that in printmaking you can't do the same amount of detail as you can like in a pencil drawing. And so they look at a printmaking piece of art and go, oh, it's not very detailed, it's not very good. And so like I've had juries before that like didn't accept any printmaking. So I go through and I look through all the people that submitted printmaking and, you know, find great representations of that particular art medium. And then every year we do a guest artist or a guest curator, and we pick somebody who with a different focus. Like this year we have Nero Villagayas O'Reilly, who is a comic book artist, and he is pulling together a whole bunch of sexy comics for us, and that's what our guest curation segment is. And the fun thing about doing the guest curators is that whenever we pick a topic or an art form, it always gives us a bump in the future, because then people are like, oh, I can submit that and get into the festival. Like we were having a real difficulty time with like having enough trans representation, or like just getting away from just pretty white girls in nature. And so we reached out to Gay City, another organization here in Seattle, and they hooked us up with a non-binary artist, and we had a section of trans art that year, and it just bumped up. All of a sudden, all my, you know, white male photographers are taking wonderful pictures of people who are non-binary and trans, because oh, I can get that in the art festival if I put it there. So it's kind of like my sneaky way to, you know, make people be more eclectic in what they're presenting in their art, because you can say anything with anybody. You don't have to stick to, you know, the beauty standards of the days, you know, and sometimes you get a much better artistic statement if you use somebody who's not within that general Western beauty model.
I have to ask you, I mean, that's one of my favorite things about you, the sneaky activism that you don't even see it, but it's there, and kudos forever for that. But I want to ask you, because it's multiple days, the festival that you're talking about, and there's different activities, how has the festival goer changed over the years?
The festival what?
The festival goer. Or are they the same?
Oh, goer. Oh, no, it has changed very, very much over time. And I would have to say that it has now, the average festival goer, instead of being the person who like goes to kinky parties on the regular, or who you know, is always out, when they're going out they're wearing their latex, it has now become the people who are like, this is the fun thing that we do once a year, where we get dressed up in our sexy clothes and we give the kids to grandma for the weekend and go have a really good time. And so we're getting I just did crunched some numbers on this, and we found that we have 49% of all the people who come to the art festival are in the greater Seattle area, which is like Everett to Olympia. And then out of that, we have 9% that come from outside the Pacific Northwest. So outside of BC, Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And then everybody else is in that Pacific Northwest area. And then 2% come from our international, not including Canada, because we include Canada in the Pacific Northwest in our demographics, because it's 3 hours away. It's not really a different place. I mean, it is, but
you know, that's a good transition to what I want to talk about next, because I do expect you to have some impact on this, with what's going on with relations with Canada. But I'm curious, the conversations that are going on now around sexuality, and it's the mood of the country. Are you guys having any conversations about adapting for the next 4 years, or what it looks like? Are you taking any kind of precautions? You don't get any federal funding, of course.
Well, very little, actually. So we do apply for grants because we are an arts organization. We are available for grants. We can't get them directly from the federal government. So that's in one place we're kind of lucky, because we don't do things for kids. We don't do things for puppies. It's hard for us to get any kind of government funding. And for that reason, it's not going to affect me too much, but it will affect me a little bit. It has already started to affect me because 2 years ago, I got a $2,000 grant from the City of Seattle's Arts and Culture Office, and I got it for the art festival. It was for us to pay artist grants, and some volunteers who are calling themselves the Washington Doge went through with a fine-tooth comb through the state budget and found Pan Arrows Foundation, went to our website, found out that we have an art gallery that's where I'm at right now, and we rent out the art gallery to other organizations who they can do anything that they want that's legal in our space, and we do not have any rules about how people are intimate with each other in our space. And because we rent it out to groups that do have parties that have sexual activity, they're just excoriated us in the on YouTube, and it's one of those.
What have they done to you?
They've excoriated us. They're just going on and on about. There's talking about how dare we take money from the government to put on men's masturbation parties. And I have never heard the term jack off so often in a 12-minute YouTube segment. So I'm pretty sure that they were just using that as an excuse to talk about men jacking off, because, that whole thing about if you're focused on it a lot, that means you're really into it.
Wait, and so Washington Doge, it's called?
That's what they're called. They're a group of volunteers who've requested information from the state on the budget, and they found us. And $2,000, Donnell. So now we have a little thing, and so we're not reacting to it, but it had us concerned. It happened. It went out 1 week before we had one of our donor events, and we were like, "Are people going to show up? Is this going to be a problem?" Luckily it sounds like it's mostly just keyboard warriors. So that's the stuff that I'm actually more worried about is harassment is what I'm worried about. We run our organization, even though we are a 501c3 nonprofit, we run our organization as if we are a for-profit business where we do events where we charge admission, and that's how we get our money. And we do art sales. We take a commission from the art sales, and that way we are always assured of our continued existence. We're not dependent on any agency to give us money. We do, but there are a fair amount of organizations that we qualify for because of the art that we do and the artists that we support. So we actually do get, I would say, it's not very much. It's maybe 5% of our total budget is grants, and I don't know how much more is donations. People are really generous with us. We have a tip function, and we're like, if you want a tip, it'll count as a donation towards the organization. If you want to, don't have to worry about it. And people are incredibly generous with us because they want us to keep going, because we're trying to create a space where people can come and have these conversations, and they can wear whatever they want and not have to worry about getting harassed.
Do you, just speaking about these conservative politics, I don't want to dwell on it too longer, but do you see a change on that side of the aisle too? I mean, of all the politicians you hear of in sex scandals or whatever, Matt Gaetz or that state representative, what was that, in Illinois recently, who was trafficking in underage minors or something. Is that? And so they've always just seemed to be horrible hypocrites about it. Did you see that changing? I feel like some of that was changing, and then Trump came back, and then so now we're kind of reverting back to these old politics. They're new in the way of the scary specific harassment, but kind of old politics in terms of these guys, denying their own kink, and
right. And that's actually a great thing that you just pointed out, is that the things that they are doing are not kind. They're not joyous. They're not focused on the pleasure of them and their partners. There's always some element of coercion. There's always some element of trafficking. There's always some element of, you're not going to have this music career if you don't bend over and take it from me. There's this like inherent like power that's what they're using the sex for, is they're not using it to create intimacy and joy between themselves and whoever they're doing it with. And I find it really sad that people so often are so repressed about their sexuality that they end up doing it in these ways that are unethical and illegal, rather than just being honest about, I'm into this thing. How do I find people that are also into this thing? Well, that means I have to talk about it. That means we have to be like, okay, well, I like this thing and you like this thing, but do we like it the same way? How can we make each other both happy by doing the thing? And that's too risky emotionally for a lot of people, I think. And so it's just easier to pretend it doesn't exist. Go pay for a sex worker. Don't ask about whether that person wants to be a sex worker or not. Just do your transaction and get what you want out of it, so that you can satisfy your need without actually really, accepting that about yourself as something that's real. I am having people that are dropping out. Like I've had one Canadian already say, I'm sorry, I don't feel safe coming to the U.S. to bring you my art, so I won't be participating in the show.
Mm-hmm. I want to, what you were just talking about is a great transition to what I wanted to bring up with you, and that was your being quoted in The Guardian about Diddy, Mm-hmm. And that, you just took me in this direction where I have to ask, as we talk about Diddy and his crimes, or his alleged crimes, we have to say.
We say alleged, be careful.
Alleged. How do you think this is a big question, but how do you think he might have expressed his sexuality in a more appropriate way? Because at a certain point, I don't even think he's having sex. I think he's exerting power first and foremost. But what do you think's going on with that guy? You were quoted in the context of consent, but I'm asking a bigger question.
Yeah.
So say it, let her rip.
So this is the tricky part where I don't have fancy letters after my name. I don't have any kind of background in any kind of psychological thing. But from what I've seen from people is that the people who are doing these things where they're taking control of people and forcing people to do things, is that there's something that they're denied themselves. And it's like, instead of just going, like you said, probably not having any sex, just orchestrating this stuff and controlling what happens at these events is sometimes more important to these people, because there's some kind of shame going on that they're not allowing themselves to have pleasure. And we have such a weird thing about this, about our culture, where somehow you have to earn pleasure. Pleasure is inherently bad. Too much pleasure will rot your brain or put hair on your palms, or nobody else will love you if you have too much pleasure. It's a really bizarre thing. And I think that is kind of the root reason why people end up doing these bizarre, intricate, controlling things where they put people in a room, give them all drugs, and make them do things to each other, and just so that they can watch, because they can't participate in it themselves, but they're still driven to do it. That's my guess. I'm incredibly frustrated about it, is that every time a big sex scandal like this comes out, I have more people that don't want to be seen at my event. They're like, please don't take my picture. Or they wear masks when they come to the art festival so nobody can recognize them, because they don't want people to think that they are somebody who is doing unethical things.
Interesting. I mentioned this actor, and now I have to look at my phone because I blanked on his name. Are you familiar with the guy? I give Lev some notes. Are you familiar with this guy Gabriel Olds by any chance? He's an actor.
I'm not.
He's an actor.
I didn't really know who he was until you sent me.
Well, no, the Los Angeles Times did this big this big expose on him. And it's not even an expose because he was arrested for sexual assault, multiple cases of sexual assault, and he was on the edge of the BDSM community. I guess you could still say he is. He hasn't been evicted or anything like that, but a bunch of charges that he was too rough in bed, and I think we're getting to the choking thing. It was that was a big part of it, and when the news broke, TMZ's been all over it, as you can imagine. TMZ would be all over it. A lot of his partners came to the foreground and said he was an especially tender lover, and he really was great at it. He was exceptional. And I brought it up because I think that the conversations we have around choking now are inadequate. That's really what I'm getting at. I've wanted to say this for a long time.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how it's become so much, so ubiquitous. It's like it's become such a common thing. I can remember that I was briefly involved with a couple many years ago, and they were very concerned about the BDSM that I engaged in. Like if I showed up at a date with bruises, they were like, "Are you sure you're okay? You're having fun, right? Like it didn't hurt too much." Like they were very concerned about my well-being, and they wanted to make sure that I wasn't being abused. It was very sweet. However, they were all about choking each other out while they were having sex, and they didn't see that as a remotely kinky thing at all. And it was like, when you're restricting somebody's airway, that's really, a lot of things can go wrong, especially if you're messing with blood flow. I mean, like, there's all sorts of things that can happen. You can, I don't really understand all the mechanics of it, but it's really a tricky, dangerous thing, which, I'm going to be honest, there are a lot of people that are like, I could die, let's do it. That's part of the excitement for some people. But you can't, the tricky thing about that one is there's no safe way to do it. The only safe way to do any kind of breath play is to gently lay your hand on somebody's throat and tell them to hold their breath. That is the only safe way. Right. Because you're not constricting anything, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you can cause all sorts of problems, and they happen so fast. So the fact that we're not talking about how it's dangerous, I mean, at least understand that it's dangerous if you're going to do it, and be like, okay, this is the risk I'm taking. This is the risk you're taking, letting me do this to you.
I was bringing it up not just because of like the literal risk in that. I just think it's almost like a microcosm of what's going on with the country. Hear me out. There are these people who are very much advanced in certain things, whether it's talking about race and gender, and there are people who are doing old-fashioned things, and there's a generation up there who've been watching a lot of porn, and they think choking is what you do. It's like what you do. And then there are people who've never heard of this, and they get it thrust upon them, and you've got this chasm of expectations, and it leads to chaos. I mean, that's not like I know there's a huge rash of these things going on, but as I was following the story from the Times and from TMZ, I was thinking, I think this guy may be a monster, but there also might be a communication problem going on here.
Oh, and that's the other tricky thing. And earlier you mentioned something about this person being part of the BDSM community, and that's like a big misnomer, is that the BDSM community is not a cohesive community. It's basically just people going, yeah, I do kinky shit. And there are little enclaves, and it's so tricky to be talking about it. It's like I almost want to, I wish we could come up with another term of that, because there are so many different ways to be kinky, even doing the same thing. And I agree with you that when you have somebody who some people are saying they're a monster and other people are saying like they're really amazing, it can go either way. It could be that they're just choosing their victims very carefully, or it could be that they're not talking about what they're doing in a detailed enough way so that the people who are like, oh yeah, I'm into that, they should be having another question that they like, how are you into that? Why are you into that? And those are the types of questions that a lot of times that in our excitement to do the fun thing, we don't talk about. Like a really good example is bondage, is that, there are some people who see bondage as this very beautiful, like meditative, you get tied up and then you sit in it and you just look pretty and nothing happens to you because it's an internal journey that you're taking in the bondage. And other people are like, I'm going to tie you up so you can't get away and I can do the terrible things to you because it's terrible and it's fun. And you're playing a role play. I might lean to that second direction.
Yeah, I mean it's effortless, just effortless. You're not just whipping this up here. Go on.
And so what happens is you have people who have incredibly dissatisfying experiences, and sometimes they feel tricked. Because, hey, you said you were going to do bondage, and then you started whacking me with, like, riding crops and shit. And so they feel betrayed because they didn't get what they thought they asked for and what the person said they were going to give them. So I'm tempted to say that a good number of the times that when these things happen, it's because people are saying, you want to do XYZ? And the other person's like, yeah, XYZ. And then you don't talk about how you do XYZ. And then the people are like, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. You betrayed me. You took advantage of me. And it's one of those really hard things that, in our culture is not good at talking. For as much as we talk in public, we are not good at talking with each other about things. I mean, I'm like a 6-year-old in relationships because I'm like, why? Tell me what that face means. When you use that word, what are you trying to say? Why do you like that?
Oh, boy. Okay, I know you have to get out of here. Anything you want us to know about what's happening this spring? Yeah, you have a new URL, so I didn't even know where to get to the site. I was doing that all wrong.
Yeah, we're so that's one of the things that we did in preparation for the coming madness is that used to be our URL was seattleerotic.org, and so now we are SEAF, SEAF.art. We got rid of the erotic in our URL because we knew this was coming. It's kind of been coming for a long time. And it's one of those things, shoving sex in people's face to make them accept that sex is a natural part of life has not worked. And so now, we're going to be respectful and subtle about it. And it's what we have to do right now in order to survive. And, some people are like, you got to be out, you got to be proud. And it's like, oh, honey, there's a lot of proud here. Don't worry about that. But we're going to be out in a gentle way that, we don't want to be the nail that's sticking up higher and we get hammered to the death. So that's our big stuff. So our big stuff going on is that we are here to stay, though, because we just had a fundraising campaign. Our landlords invited us to become part owners in the building that we rent. Whoa. And so now we are a 10% owner in our building, and we cannot get kicked out. I mean, our landlords love us anyway, but now we really aren't going anywhere. So we've been really focusing on security as an organization because these coming 4 years, people are going to need a safe space to go. And so at Gallery Erotic, and at which is our year-round home, and then the Seattle Erotic Art Festival, we're really focused on making sure that people have a place to go where they don't have to look over their shoulder before they, have a conversation, that they can wear what they want to wear and not worry about being harassed, and also be celebrated for, like, look at you go in your fancy latex. That's awesome. Good for you. Instead of people being like, why do you wear those tight things that are like rubber and you look weird?
Hey, okay, let me ask you, because I've asked you this before, but Lev's here so I can get his take too.
Okay.
Why is the Pacific Northwest such a kinky place?
Because it's so cold. We have to do lots of things inside, and you can only do the same thing so many times before you start deciding you want to try something new. Also, I think it's because this is the farthest that you can go before you get out of the country. And so a lot of people come here because they're misfits and they're like, they want to go to Canada or they want to go to the wilds of Alaska, and then they get stuck here. It's also why a lot of what do you call them? Serial killers end up here because they're trying to get to Canada and they can't get across the border.
Anything to add to that, Love?
No, I mean, I agree. I think the weather plays a lot to it, the geography, but I also wonder too about also just the history of it as like port cities.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, being on the Pacific Rim, I think, has a lot to do with it.
International travel and a lot of blue collar work, timber and fishing and all that. Yeah, I mean, it's always surprised me, right? Like, because I think for a while, I don't know if it's still the case, but Portland had more, sex businesses than any other city in the country.
A lot. Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, Portland's really awesome for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Second only to Vancouver.
I will get to say I also got to meet once, and I don't know if it's I mean, it's verified in that it was the first official contest I guess they had in Florida. Speaking of like S&M, was the first slave and master competition where you had couples that played these slave master roles, sexual, not racial. Mm-hmm. And this woman that I met here in Portland was the winner. Her and her partner were the first.
Oh, the very first one.
Slave and master couple that won.
Wow.
This contest
the title holders.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was so funny too because she just looked like anybody's grandma at this point, But
I know. As I age, I'm definitely like, well, so this is. I'm now picking up on those subtle things my great grandma used to say when I was younger. That I'm like, oh.
Yeah. And she's a lawyer working on a lot of like.
That's awesome.
Issues and everything else.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
On that note, I'm going to congratulate myself for not making any kind of Pacific Rim jokes.
Congratulations.
You just did, yeah. No, you just did.
Now all of our brains have gone there. There we go. This is a perfect thing to end on.
But you guys give a great explanation. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love the Pacific Northwest. It's not like you even have to be having sex with people, but that energy is there. That kinky energy is what I think keeps Portland and Seattle kind of weird. But I'm going to say goodbye. Anything else, Sophia, you want to add on the way out the door?
I'm just going to put a call out there. If either of you ever want to come to the festival, I've got tickets for you. It would be an absolute joy to show you around the festival, and especially to bring you back, Donnell.
Well, I hope to be there this spring. I'm really trying. I have some business up in Portland, so I was thinking I could maybe bounce up there. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
But yeah,
Awesome.
I have to say the great thing about the website, and I hope this is right, the art's still up there. People can look at all the stuff from over the years.
No, we actually don't. We don't put up a whole lot of the art. We do have a Flickr feed where we take pictures at the festival, and so people can see the art as it's displayed in the festival. But we don't actually republish the all the art for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, it's some amazing stuff, and I feel privileged to go. And I'm, as always, privileged to know you, Sophia. Thank you for coming on.
Such a joy. Wonderful to talk with you both. Thank you so much.